Hi, my name is Dr. Farah Bukhari. Today I have a question for all of you. Has anyone tried to dig deeper into why this war was started? Nobody's talking about it. There have been like a few here and there comments that, oh yeah, the military industrial complex is gaining more and more profitability since the war started. But having said that, we've been through this when the Iraq war happened, the Libya invasion happened, the Syria crisis happened, the Yemen crisis happened, the Afghanistan invasion happened. We've been through it all these years in the last few decades. But how come, since the inception of this entire war on October 7th, nobody's talking about what is the net gain in the wealth of the elite? Yes, what is the economics of this war? How much money have the elite gained? I'm talking about objectivity, where we have facts and figures, because we do have the addresses and the names of the deep state and the elite who can try to control this world and who try to make profits off wars. How come not a single news outlet has tried to bring about the profitability for the elite from this war? Because once we answer that question, we should be able to invoke a ceasefire. Once we expose the dirty, ugly truth behind this war, why Biden is so desperate to sell this war to the rest of the world, we will be able to fight Biden back better. We need to know how much money in the last 22 days has been given to the elite as a result of this war. How much money they have made out of this war in the last 22 days. We need to know what is that money being invested into. And we need to know how much is the share of Joe Biden, how much is the share of Rishi Sunak, how much is the share of Justin Trudeau, how much is the share of Ursula, how much is the share of Meloni, how much is the share of Macron, and how much is the share of Olaf Scholz and Netanyahu. This has to be looked into. The world has to know how much money have all these corrupt leaders made in the last 22 days from this war. It's very important. It is the most important question that we should look into and expose to the rest of the world. What has the Biden's family invested into in the last few weeks since the war started, even before the war started? This war is not about the hostages. Let me be very clear about it. It's a hoax. It's one of the biggest hoax sold to the American people and to the Israelis, who are currently happy that their hostages are going to be liberated and freed and released. No. Those hostages are not going to be killed by Hamas. Hamas never had the intentions of killing those hostages. Hamas was just going to use them to try to exchange prisoners and try to get prisoners released from the Israeli detention cells, including children and women, especially, who've been caged extrajudicially. Hamas did not kill the 50 hostages that got bombed by the Biden administration. Yes, 50 hostages, 50 captives. They were not killed by Hamas. They would have been living today if it were not for the angry, trigger-happy reaction of Biden, which was totally engineered to gain profits out of a so-called crusade. So 50 hostages were killed from the bombing of the air raids of Biden administration. Now, I keep on saying Biden administration and I don't say Israel, because Israel is the proxy group of Biden administration in the Middle East. That is what Biden administration, along with the Western leadership, has rendered the status of Israel from the idea of a two-state solution where Yasser Arafat offered an olive branch and for the first time accepted the state of Israel as long as the pre-1967 borders were reaffirmed, to coming to a point where now each and every civilian of Gaza and West Bank is trying to protect his or her life from the aggression of the Israeli soldiers, where it has become an aggressor against unarmed civilians who have a very weak proxy, or I won't even call it proxy because I think Hamas is still being profiled as an armed resistance of the Palestine state, but very weak, with not enough sophisticated arms to be able to protect the lives of these civilians. It's not even an army. You can't even call it an army. It's just a group that's trying to protect the lives of the children and the lives of the women and the elderly from the Israeli aggression. But it has been profiled as a terrorist by the West because it suits them. When 9/11 happened, the Guantanamo Bay was filled up. They had to create it in a state outside of the US so that they could keep it legit. Even though it was extrajudicial, it was illegal from the American law's point of view. And they called them all terrorists. They were not allowed hearings, they were not allowed a proper court trial, they were not allowed to even have a lawyer. We still have one example of that, Dr. Afia sitting in a US detention cell without getting a proper audience, without getting a proper hearing, without getting proper justice. And so after 9/11, they just had one policy that if they felt you're a terrorist, they would just be off with your head. And they executed that policy. They made amendments in their laws to be able to execute these policies after 9/11. And they made profits out of it. They made profits out of these Guantanamo cells. They made profit out of these mass incarcerations. They made profits out of selling weapons to every side of the wars or conflicts that came out of 9/11, where we had these mercenaries, we had these military contractors, where we had these terrorist groups that started to spring up in various parts of the Middle East that were killing mostly Muslims. Even I think today or yesterday, ISIS blasted Kabul in the name of Islam when basically Al-Quds is under attack by Israel. So what does that tell you? ISIS fighters have been receiving treatment at Tel Aviv hospitals. UN has tried to confront Israel over its sponsorship and help to the ISIS fighters all this time. However, Israel continues to support these terrorist factions, just like India supports TTP in its proxy war against Pakistan. So the idea is to create a greater Hindutva land and a greater Israel kingdom by destabilizing the entire region and by trying to plunder the resources. It's an old bogus strategy that's been utilized by the colonists and the imperial forces in the past. We've been through the history and we've seen that happen all the time. I'm not going to go through all of this right now. Right now, the point I'm trying to make is the hostages. This video is about the hostages. And what is this war about? This war is not about hostages. This war is not about the release, the freedom, the liberation of the hostages. Because if you had even 1%, worry, concern for the lives of these hostages, You would never want to carpet bomb an area that contains those hostages. But for the last 22 days, we have seen rampant, blind carpet bombing of Gaza, leading to death of 50 hostages who could have been living today, who could have been alive today, who could have been released by Hamas, that also released those four hostages untouched, uninjured. They would have been living if it were not for the President of United States and his war machine, the genocidal terrorist Netanyahu. They want you to think that they're fighting to liberate the hostages, but they're technically, unofficially declaring a genocide not just against the people of Palestine, but also against the hostages. And the proof is the death, the untimely death of the 50 hostages that could have been living today if it were not for the defense policy of Biden administration and his NATO allies in the Middle East. They have been bombing indiscriminately, caring in the least about the lives of these hostages. And by the end of their war, most likely, that they have imposed upon the Muslim nations, they're probably going to have a complete eradication, obliteration of not just the people of Gaza, which is a premeditated, cold-blooded, planned genocide, but also at the same time, complete annihilation, obliteration of the hostages. The hostages are going to be gone, period, comprende? This is the doing of your president in the United States of America, on your tax dollars, in your name. A genocide of the hostages, a genocide of more than 8,000 civilians of Gaza who had nothing to do with terrorism, who had no arms. Half of them, about 3,000 of them, were children. 53 United Nations workers just obliterated, and 50 hostages bombed to death by the Biden administration in collaboration with its war machine, the genocidal terrorist Netanyahu, who's trying to sell this war to you as a crusade, as a holy war. So here's the thing, this is what they're doing. If you are a religious person, and whether you are a Jew, whether you are a Christian, whether you are a Muslim, or whether you are any other religion, you're a Hindu or any other religion, they will try to sell this war to you in your language. So if you are a Zionist, they will say, oh, Zionism is great. We're trying to protect Zionism. We're trying to do this for Zionism and this and that. If you're a Christian and you are a very enthusiastic Christian, they're going to say, we're doing it for Jesus Christ, peace be upon him. It is a crusade. We're trying to get rid of the enemies of Jesus Christ. This is how they're going to project. They're going to sell the war to you. If you are a businessman and you're a business tycoon, or you are like from entrepreneur circle, I'm talking about like an international firm, and they want investment from you, they're going to say, oh, we're doing it so that you can make profit off it. And they will show them the mathematics and the economics behind this war, how it's going to help you make profit out of it. This is how they're selling the war to the rest of the world. This is how they're gaining their strength. And this is how they're gaining that strong backup of the elite, that this war is for you. They will talk to you in your language to try to sell this war to you in your words, at your level, so that you're willing to accept this genocide of not just 8,000 people of Gaza, but also the 50 hostages. In fact, by the end of it, they're going to make sure every hostage, in the captivity of Hamas is decimated to death. Not by Hamas, but by their bombs. By bombs made in the United States of America, by bombs sent to Israel to be used against these hostages by your president, Biden, by your ruling regime, by your Congress. They are desperate to veto every ceasefire effort made in the United Nations. Why? Because they haven't made enough profits as yet, because they haven't achieved enough goals by now. They want to not just, they've been trying to create a greater Israel in the Middle East for the last many decades, and they have failed because Iraq is still resisting, Syria is still resisting, Libya is still resisting. Libya technically just kicked out the Western countries' ambassadors because it was so upset at how the West was treating the people of Gaza. And so they've been trying to occupy, plunder, and colonize the Muslim nations, trying to convert them into subservient Greater Israel territories for years and years and years. But they have been unsuccessful. We saw what happened in Afghanistan, how they had to rush out of Afghanistan trying to save their butts. We saw what happened in the last few days in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon. In Oman, I saw a video where someone was telling the British military officer, that you don't have any right to stay here, you need to get out. We are seeing the angry mobs of people of the Middle East, Turkey, resisting against the American consulates and the Israeli embassies wherever they are. So the Muslims have been resisting against the creation of a greater Israel and also the Akhand Bharat Hindutva. Pakistan has been fighting a proxy war against both the entities who have been trying to amputate Pakistan for the last few decades. They have been trying to amputate Balochistan, KPK, Sindh, and Pakistan has been fighting and sacrificing its soldiers. There have been more than 100,000 loss of soldiers in this war against terrorism. Terrorists who are the proxy terrorists, funded, sponsored, armed by, unfortunately, Israel and India. There have been documented, credible evidences produced by the Pakistani governments that have been shared with the rest of the world. Having said that, coming back to the same point, the hostages are going to die. They're going to be killed, period. If there's no ceasefire right away, unfortunately, Biden is going to kill all the hostages. And one of the other reasons that I'm noticing is being brought up for Biden's intentions to kill all these hostages is because these hostages are actually going to be the witnesses to testify about Israel's involvement in committing the October 7th event in a bid to justify Israel's invasion into Gaza. So they want all of them dead. Doesn't matter how high profile they are, doesn't matter if they're one of the top generals, doesn't matter if they're one of the top ranking ministers in the cabinet or advisors or philanthropists or entrepreneurs, they don't care. They want them dead. They have killed 50 hostages who could have been alive. Hamas released 4 hostages. They were untouched, they were unarmed. Hamas only is asking for exchange of prisoners. Prisoners who are mostly women and children in the detention cells of Israel. And Biden doesn't want to do that because Biden wants all the hostages dead. Why? Because these hostages are going to be key witnesses to the inside job that Israel committed along with Biden on October 7th to justify an invasion into Gaza, to instigate a war, a so-called crusade against Iran, against Lebanon, against Syria, against Egypt, and Turkey. So this is what this war is all about. It is not about your religious ideology. It is not about ethics. It is not about self-defense. It is not about the humanitarian rights. It is not about the international charter. It is not about US Constitution. It is not about Western countries' constitutions. It is about money, number one, how much profit they want to make out of it. Number two, how much political leverage, political clout they want to get out of it. And it is not about the hostages. The hostages, they have already decided they're going to kill them all. 50 were killed not by Hamas. Hamas wants to release the hostages, but Biden does not want the hostages to be released. I'm not going to reiterate it again, but this is the last time I'm going to say it, and I hope you can understand this. Hamas does not want to kill the hostages. Hamas released 4 hostages, untouched, uninjured, but Biden wants to kill the hostages. Biden has already executed the manslaughter of 50 hostages in his blind, indiscriminate air raids through his terrorist war machine, Netanyahu. And Biden plans to completely eradicate, obliterate, annihilate the rest of the hostages. He does not care about the hostages. This war is not about the hostages. This war is all about the elite walking away with more money than they've had in the last few decades. And with Biden having more power by controlling these elite, by getting them to work for him in the coming election. That's what this war is all about. So someone has to look into the economics of this war that I started up with. Someone has to talk about how much money have the elite made via Biden, Netanyahu, via Rishi Sunak, via Ursula, via Olaf, via Meloni, via Trudeau, via Macron, and how much money more is going to be filtered and laundered through this war for the elite. Someone has to do the mathematics over here. How much have the Biden administration gained through stocks? How much has the US Congress gained through stocks? How many US congressmen who vetoed the resolution of ceasefire, how many of those congressmen have invested into MIC, military industrial complex stocks? And how many of them are on the board of these military industrial complex and how many of them are in bed with the profiteering elite? So this is the homework that our journalists have to do. They have to find out where this money is going to be invested into. Is it going to go into offshore companies? Is it going to be laundered? Are they going to create something like Bitcoin? Where is this money going? How come the price of Bitcoin has gone up during this war? Is this money being funneled through Bitcoin, through crypto? This has to be sorted out. And then most important of all is, what is the share of Biden administration, especially Joe Biden, from this war profiteering? What is the share of Rishi Sunak? What is the share of Ursula? What is the share of Macron? What is the share of Olaf Scholz? And what is the share of Trudeau? What is the share of Meloni? And even Pope Francis, who has yet to condemn the massacre of the civilians of Gaza, not just the massacre of the hostages that was committed not by Hamas, but by his buddies in the Oval Office, in the European Parliament, in the UK Parliament. So I have never met Hamas in my life. I've never spoken with them. But they had no intentions to kill these hostages, period. They've released 4, they would have released these 50 hostages that were just bombed by the Biden administration with your American tax dollars in your name. And he's going to kill every hostage, period. He's on this KKK directed, dictated crusade mission. He's selling this war to the KKK philanthropists too, investors too, in the name of, oh, I'm going to do this crusade for you. He's selling this war to the Islam haters as a crusade. He's selling this war to the profiteers and the elite who are into money, to the entrepreneurs as a big business venture. So he's talking to you in your language, and you're getting fooled. These hostages are going to be killed not by Hamas, but by Biden, by Rishi, by Macron, by Trudeau, by Olaf, by Meloni, and by Ursula, via Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the proxy gun machine that they've unleashed upon the Middle East. And they have a big purpose behind it. And the economics has to be discussed. It has to be talked about. Everybody has to talk about it, not just me. All the economists, globally, wherever they are, they should talk about it. This should be the talk of the world right now. How much money is being produced by Biden and the elite from this war? Where is this money going? What has this money been converted into? You have to expose this if you want ceasefire, because they have been vetoing every effort of ceasefire in the United Nations. They just bombed last night, despite the fact that UNGA had processed successfully a ceasefire resolution. They don't care about the United Nations. They don't give a damn about the United Nations and what you think or I think. They want what they want, and they will get it at any cost, even if they have to kill the hostages that they have started this war for. They killed 50. They will kill all of them. So don't you think that they're not going to kill them. They will kill them. They will make sure they are killed and massacred and decimated so that they cannot testify about their involvement in the October 7th incident that led to their justification for an invasion into Gaza, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, Iran, and the rest of the Middle East, even Turkey. Bye-bye. I hope this makes sense to you, and I hope you guys get some ideas about how to end this war. This war is not going to end like this. You have to do some more homework. And please stop asking these scumbags for mercy. They are not going to have any mercy over you. And don't you dare ask for mercy and compassion from these devils. Nobody asks for mercy from Satan. These people are satanic. They have no soul. They are soulless. So kindly, one request, stop asking these scumbags for mercy and compassion. They don't have it. They just don't have it. So stop wasting your time. And they are not going to take your ceasefire offer because they have bigger goals. And they're going to kill all the hostages, period. They've killed 50, they're going to kill the rest of them because it works for them. Bye-bye.